Hi everyone, this is Josh from JR004, and this morning I have an awesome opportunity to talk to an inspirational entrepreneur. Just to give you a little bit of information about him, the guy's name is Cameron Johnson. Now, Cameron started his first business at the age of 9, and before graduating high school, he was recognized as one of the most successful young entrepreneurs in the world. As a teenager, he started a dozen profitable businesses, and at 15, he became the youngest American appointed to the board of a Tokyo-based company. In 2007, he released his awesome new book, which was You Call the Shots, Succeed Your Way and Live the Life You Want, with the 19 Essential Secrets of Entrepreneurship. And in 2008, saw Cameron make it as a finalist on Oprah Winfrey's first primetime series, The Big Give, which aired on ABC. Now, most recently, he hosted Season 4 of Beat the Boss, which airs on the BBC in the UK. And it's great to have you on the call, Cameron. Thank you very much.
Thanks for having me, Josh. Good to be with you.
Now, I hope you like that little intro. I kind of borrowed from your website, but everything on it is awesome. And like I mentioned in one of our initial emails, another person that I've been working with and had a chance to talk to talks so highly about you. And one of the great things that my callers will be interested in hearing is just how approachable you really are. I mean, I'm a guy who did an interview, but I was able to send an email and you were kind enough to respond. So I think that says a lot about yourself, and it goes to show that nothing's worth not trying at least once.
Well, thank you. Yeah, I agree 100%. And if you've read my book, You Call the Shots, the very first chapter is called Put Yourself Out There. And what I found in business is that you've got to go for it and you got to put yourself out there because, I was giving a speech yesterday to a group of about 500 high school students. And, one of the things I said was, it doesn't matter if you have the best voice in the world, and you could be the next Mariah Carey or, the next big singer. But if you're not willing to put yourself out there and share it with everyone, then no one's going to know. And I think that people want to help other people. And certainly when I'm approached by someone that, is doing something great like you are, and it's something that I'm able to help with, then, that excites me as well, and I want to help. Obviously, I'm not able to, necessarily answer every single email that comes in or say yes to every single email that comes in, but I do try and, do the best I can at responding to emails and also, of course, helping those that I can, when it makes sense and when it's beneficial to, when I can help someone else out and beneficial to you.
Yeah, and that's awesome. One of the things I wanted to do before jumping back on You Call the Shots, because like I said, there are 19 keys or secrets that you touch on, which, each one of them are gold. I've had a chance to look through it briefly. But I wanted to kind of help viewers learn a little bit more about you. Now, I've certainly done my homework because, as I said, as soon as I learned about you, I searched on the net and read a few interviews as well as watched a couple video pieces about you. But for everyone that's, starting to adjust, I think your story is a great one, even from the very beginning. So would you be able to just take us through that?
Sure. Yeah, I started my first business when I was 9 years old, and it was a small printing business, printing greeting cards, stationery, anything that I could print with my computer and my printer. And that's really how I got my start. Just simply printing greeting cards and selling them to my parents and to neighbors and relatives. And the business grew through word of mouth. And it wasn't until I started selling Beanie Babies over the internet when I was about 12 that I started making really kind of big money. That year I made about $50,000 selling Beanie Babies over the internet. And I started by selling my sister's Beanie Baby collection, and I actually bought it from her for $100, and I sold it for $1,000. So I made $900 off my sister in just a matter of a few days on a website called eBay, which was brand new at the time. It was 1995. And that's really how I got my start in business, was with those two simple businesses. And, I think being young really helped me for a lot of reasons. One, it helped me because when you're young, you are willing to take more risk because you don't have as much to lose. If I only have a few $100s saved up and I'm going to start a printing business using my computer and my printer, well, I don't really have that much to lose because I'm just, printing orders based on, the orders that I get. The other thing that helps young people is, one, older people want to see young people succeed, and two, that when you are young, you're a little bit naive, and you haven't yet been taught to think inside of the box. So you might come up with some wild and outlandish idea, but it happens to be very creative and it happens to maybe work. And so that's what I think helped me, was being young and naive, not stupid, but young and naive, and willing to go for it. And I would always research my ideas. And I would always study business. So I would study, really successful business people like Bill Gates and Michael Dell and Richard Branson and Donald Trump. And I would read their books, and I would read magazine articles written about them, and I would, learn everything I can on the internet about them. And when I started investing in the stock market when I was 13, I, started reading everything I could from Warren Buffett, and learning everything he teaches about, investing. And Warren Buffett's always said, buy what you know. Buy companies that, you know everything about them inside and out, and you know their management team and all those things. And that's sort of what I've done throughout my career is, double up on the companies that I know a lot about. And for me, as a young kid, that was companies like Microsoft and Dell, and all the companies that I'd been reading about from reading biographies from Bill Gates and Michael Dell, of course. And, of course, at the same time, those stocks did very well back in the, in the 90s when I was growing up. So it's been a fun journey.
And one of the things you touched on too was how you enjoyed reading material by Richard Branson and Donald Trump. And one of the most amazing things for me was just that story about you and how you had a brief, subtle interaction with Donald Trump. And it plays on the point you made about naivety. So would you be able to just share with our listeners that little story?
Yeah, so I had I had begged my parents to take me to New York City when I was in the 4th grade. This was before I had ever had a business. I was just a 4th grader. I was 8 years old. I begged my parents to take me to New York City. Finally, my dad made a deal with me. He said, if you get straight A's this entire school year, your mom and I will take you to New York City for a weekend next summer. So I got straight A's. I brought home my report card, and I showed it to my parents. I found out that we were going to New York City. And then I asked if we could stay at the Plaza Hotel. And the only reason I knew what the Plaza Hotel was because it was in a movie called Home Alone 2 that was a huge hit that I saw as an 8-year-old. And I said, we stayed at a hotel, the one from the movie. And finally my parents said, yeah, sure, we'll stay at that hotel. Well, in the movie, Donald Trump has a cameo appearance because he owned the hotel in real life. And so when I found out the date that we were going to New York and I found out they were staying at the Plaza, I decided to write Donald Trump a letter. And again, this plays to being young and naive and not knowing any better and sort of just going for it. Because when I wrote this letter, I didn't ask my parents for help. I didn't tell my parents I was writing it because I was afraid that they would say, you shouldn't do that or that sort of thing. And I didn't tell any of my friends because I didn't want to come to school every day and my friends say, hey, did you ever hear back from Mr. Trump? So I didn't tell anyone I was writing this letter. So it was just a sheet of notebook paper that I used. I said, Dear Mr. Trump, my name's Cameron Johnson. I'm 8 years old. Of course, it was handwritten. Coming to New York City for the first time. I just got straight A's. I'm staying at your hotel. The only thing I want to do while I'm in New York is I want to see the suite where the movie was filmed. I want to see the suite that was in Home Alone 2. That would be really, really cool. Thank you, Cameron Johnson. So I never heard back from him. I mailed it a few weeks before I went. On the envelope, I didn't even know how to address it because I didn't have the hotel's address or anything. So I just wrote Donald Trump, the Plaza Hotel, New York City. I didn't even know if it was going to get to it, so I didn't have a postal code on it or a zip code or anything. So I never knew if he even received it, but even if he did receive it, I figured that he was very busy, and I just never heard back. When we got to the hotel and my mom gave the receptionist her name to check in, the receptionist said, you must be Cameron, as she looked at me, as an 8-year-old kid. And my mom's thinking, how does the receptionist know my son's name? And then she goes on to say, Mr. Trump received your letter. At this point, my parents are really confused. And Mr. Trump has arranged for you and your parents to stay in the suite that was in the movie the whole time you're here. So Mr. Trump did that only because I was an 8-year-old kid, and I wrote to him and I asked for it. But the lesson I took away from that was, obviously he's a successful businessman, and I want to one day be just like him. He obviously is very busy, but it still didn't take very much of his time to be able to say, hey, I can help this, young kid. Nobody's in the suite this weekend while they're here. Let's put them in it. That sort of thing. And that's why I have that attitude when people reach out and contact me. And if I'm able to help someone, whether it's, making a connection or whether it's, helping them with a project they're on or maybe giving them 30 seconds worth of advice. Obviously, I get paid a substantial amount of money to do consulting for Fortune 500 companies and for startup internet companies for that matter. But I mean, if someone sends me a quick email saying, hey, what's the best place to get a website hosted when I only want to spend a few dollars a month? it takes me probably 15 seconds to respond and give them an answer, and it would probably take me the same amount of time to just hit the delete key. So, I mean, if it's that easy for me to help someone else, then, I would be selfish or really wrong to not do that.
Dude, that's amazing, man. I mean, one of the great things about it's so cool because talking to you, it's like no one would, a majority of us would never have thought, let's just be crazy and go for it. And you won't be alone in saying that Home Alone 2 is one of the greatest family movies of all time.
Exactly.
I mean, you really can't go wrong with Home Alone 2. And so just for people to be able to relate in that term, especially in our age group, because can you just share with people, it's going to seem crazy, but how old you are at the moment?
I'm 20. I actually just had a birthday last week. I am 26 years old now, so I am getting some age on me.
Hey, well, still, happy late birthday.
Thank you.
And like I said, everyone will be listening to this and they'll be able to relate to it. One of the really cool things too is that when you were mentioning how, you consider it important to go out of your way to help other people. The great thing is that when I found out about you, I had to track down how to get in touch with you, and hopefully this doesn't get your email spammed, but I just went to your website and there were a whole lot of emails with your domain name, and then I just winged it, and so I just put it in, didn't know whether you were going to receive it, but just to get that response from you was huge. It was really humbling. So I appreciate that, and it goes to show that people should really put themselves out there and just go for things, even if they don't.
Well,
even
thank
if you.
And you're also. Yeah, Josh, and I'll also say that you're really smart in the way you send your email. You were very direct. It was very short. You were very to the point. A lot of people, if your email, for instance, was 5 pages long, I would have never had time to read it. Whereas when you're very short and to the point, and it's 2 or 3 sentences, and we obviously had a mutual friend as well, then it's very easy to help. But I mean, when someone writes a 3-page paper for an email, to be honest with you, I really don't have the time to respond to that. And I may end up putting more time into someone that sends a very short email than someone that sends a very long one, because I never get past the first paragraph. And that's really the key, is keeping it very short and very concise. And that's really what I did when I wrote to Mr. Trump too. I mean, no one had taught me how to write a letter to a billionaire when I was an 8-year-old kid. I just said, hey, I'm going to be at your hotel. I'd like to see the suite. I didn't ask I wanted to stay there. I wasn't asking for anything for free. I just wanted to open the door and look inside. And look at how he responded. And he was able to respond to that message. Probably he read my letter, and it probably took 30 seconds of his time to hand it to his secretary and say, see if the room's available. That sort of thing. So, I mean, when it's something that someone can do in less than 3 to 5 minutes, at least that initial contact, that is very key, because I get a lot of emails, like I said, that will be very, very long. And while they obviously have good intentions, and while I'd like to help them, I just don't even have time to read the whole email,
Fantastic advice. And one thing other people should remember too is that if it's only those few sentences, it doesn't necessarily mean that, like for instance, my situation was I sent an email of a few sentences, but since then you and I have had an exchange of maybe 10 emails since then. And
right, exactly.
Although short, it's long, so yeah, it really goes to show. And to be honest with you, Cameron, I spent a long time finding how to say the right stuff in the shortest amount of lines. So it goes to show, if you really want to make contact with someone, then take the time to write a short letter.
Yeah, exactly. And also, furthermore, I mean, because I was so interested in what you were doing, I went to your website and I read all about some of the other articles you've written and all that stuff. And had you written this 3-page paper from the start, I never would have even gotten that far. So I mean, I think it's really a science or an art to knowing how to approach people, one, in person, and two, by pen or by email. So that's really important that young people and people of all ages know how to do that.
Great advice. If I can jump on your book, because like I said, there's so much great content there, and I have done a little snooping on the net, so I do know that for a lot of these things that you mention in your book, like for instance, when you're talking about how to start small, I find that really important, because a lot of people come out with this huge idea and this great vision of grandeur when they want to set out to be an entrepreneur and be really successful. But with you saying as like your number 2 tip is just to start small, how valuable do you think that is with, somebody starting out?
Well, I started small really because I had to. I started when I was in the 4th grade. I probably had $50 to my name. I, only had a 4th grade education because that's as old as I was. So I think starting small for me definitely helped me build my success over time. It taught me all the lessons, because when I started my first business, the printing business or the Beanie Baby business or an email company I started. And when I started all those and I didn't have very much money, that taught me how to be creative. That taught me how to think outside of the box. That taught me how to, find things at the lowest cost or as cheap or as inexpensively as possible. Whereas I always say if someone came along when I was 13 or 14 years old and said, hey, Cameron, you've had some success. You know what you're doing. Here's $100,000. Turn this into, the next big business. Well, there's no question that I would have blown the $100,000. Not blown it on, buying cars or anything because obviously I couldn't even drive, but I would have blown the money. I would have spent it on advertising. I would have spent it on, expensive web designers and consultants and all these different things, and I wouldn't have anything to show for it at the end. Whereas when you are small, you are tracking every single dollar. And I think to be successful, when you look at the fact that Dell Computer Corporation is the second largest in the world, behind Hewlett-Packard, and they were the number one for a while until Compaq and HP merged. But also, you look at Microsoft. Those two companies, Dell and Microsoft, they started in a dorm room. And you look at so many successful companies, they start very, very small and they grow over time. And it's very hard to actually go out and just build a big business and expect all the customers to flock to you. I said probably a month ago or something on my Twitter account, which I don't use Twitter that much, but I'll randomly share articles and things like that at, twitter.com/my name, Cameron Johnson. But one of the things I said was, build it and they will come only works in Las Vegas. That doesn't really work on the internet. You could spend, tens of thousands or hundreds of thousands of dollars on building the next social networking site, on building the next news website. You could spend hundreds of thousands of dollars on building, the next photo sharing website. Whatever your idea is, you can go and spend as much money as you want. No one's going to stop you. But that doesn't mean that customers are going to come and use it. So I think that you, especially with the internet, need to start small and you need to grow virally, which is the least expensive way, which is when your existing users, tell all of their friends. And that's just become easier through email and social networking. So I think the key is starting small. I think that's just as important. You're going to put your stuff out there, and you have to start small.
You were also, because I've watched a video clip where you're doing a presentation at Piranha Marketing, and in that you shared a really interesting story about how you leveraged what you knew to capitalize on an incident or a PR release that was made by Ford Motor Group. Are you able to share that story as well? Because although it doesn't touch directly with any of the 19 points, I think there are bits and pieces from it that all kind of culminate for this big idea that you had and how smart you were to just, work off what you knew.
Yeah, so the lesson was my dad, my great-grandfather started a Ford dealership back in the 1930s. So a long story short, in 1999, I was 15 years old, and Ford announced that they were going to be buying Jaguar, Land Rover, Aston Martin, and Volvo. And Ford was going to call those premium brands the Premier Automotive Group. So me as a 15-year-old kid and knowing the internet pretty well, and I also should say I'm not a computer programmer. I can't design my own websites. I don't know graphics. I don't know HTML. So even though all my businesses were web-based, I always just partnered with people that are experts at that. So I'm just sort of an idea guy, a business guy, sort of just a problem solver, just figure out the way to make things work. So anyhow, when Ford announced that they were going to be calling these brands the Premier Automotive Group, I went to a website called USPTO.gov, stands for U.S. Patent Trademark Office.gov, and I did a trademark search on Premier Automotive Group because internally in my head, hey, here's this Fortune 500 or really Fortune 10 company announcing that they're going to be calling these brands the Premier Automotive Group. I wonder how long ago they filed the patent, the trademark on that name. Does a Fortune 10 company do it a week in advance? Do they do it a year in advance? How long have they been planning? So my brain is sort of just saying, I want to find out the backstory on this. So I was just doing some research. So I went to the trademark website, and it turns out they had never registered the trademark on it. So I said, wow, well then why don't I go look up the domain name and see when they bought PremierAutomotiveGroup.com. I can figure out they bought it last week or they bought it 6 months ago. Well, I went to, at the time it was Network Solutions instead of like a GoDaddy or anything selling domain names. And I went to Network Solutions and I did a Who Is lookup, and no one owned that domain name. So what I did, I registered premierautomotivegroup.com, .net, and .org. And I said to myself, well, hey, now I own them, so when Ford goes to need them, I can sell them to them because they didn't have a trademark on them. I'm not doing anything wrong. Well, a year goes by and never hear anything from them, and I never approached them. And they end up registering the trademark a few months after they made that announcement. And then about a year and a half goes by, and Ford Motor Company files a lawsuit against me. And they file it against my printing company because even though I didn't have a printing company when I was 15, that was still my business. That was still my legal business name. So I was still operating under Cheers and Tears Printing Company. And so the domain name just had Cheers and Tears on it. It didn't have, of course, that I was a 15-year-old entrepreneur in Virginia. So all of a sudden I get served with a lawsuit because Ford is now suing me for trademark infringement. So without getting into a really long story, they basically sued me, wanting me to give over each of the domain names, to turn them over, and to pay them $3,000 a piece as like a violation and / attorney fees for them. So what my attorney did, because I was 15, I already had an attorney from my other businesses because we were incorporated and, always had all that stuff done. So what I did, my attorney said, well, they don't have any legal rights here. Let's sue them back. So we basically threatened to countersue. We threatened to countersue them, and we told my attorney was doing all this, not me. But my attorney said, "You realize you've sued a 15-year-old, and he's been featured in a lot of newspapers and magazines, and he wasn't trying to do anything wrong. He was trying to help you. And so if you want to go through to this and go to court, it's probably not going to look very good in the media that you're suing a 15-year-old." And that he outsmarted you, in many ways. So long story short, Ford ended up paying me a pretty nice chunk of money, and we settled. And they bought the domain names, and I gave them to them. And what's really funny about that story is, so Ford Motor Company has all these attorneys that just go out and sue people for trademark infringement. So after we get through all this and they buy the domain names from me, they never even used them. Never once used the domain name. And they ended up, of course, a couple years ago, they ended up selling off Jaguar, Land Rover, Volvo, and Aston Martin. So Ford doesn't even own any of them now. But that's just amazing at how, Ford Motor Company, a Fortune 10 company with 200,000 employees, it just shows you that the left hand doesn't know what the right hand's doing. And that's the problem with really big companies like that.
Wow. And saying that, does that mean that you're looking at continuing to create a mini empire for yourself? Do you see yourself fitting into the slot of being the owner of a lot of smaller companies where you can still see what's going on and oversee them? Or are you quite interested in creating a larger company through the next 10 to 20 years of your life?
Well, that's a good question because for me, I had a lot of different businesses, and they were never really related. They were all totally different. So I never started one company and stuck with it 10 years wanting to grow it into a really big company. So for me, the exciting part is the startup phase. And after that, quite frankly, I've always sold the company or sold the assets and closed it and moved on. So, I mean, I may like to own a number of different businesses going forward. I think the key is cash flow from a number of different businesses, and a number of different assets, whether it's real estate, whether it's internet companies, whether it's, something related to online advertising, maybe it's related to an online monthly subscription service where people are paying, $20 a month to you, Josh, to get your interviews that you're doing with different people. Whatever the business model is, I think there's a way to create a number of those different businesses. And while individually none of those might be a multi-million dollar company, separately, they all add up.
Mm. And one of the cool things you talk about too is that in doing something like that, it really allows people to get a better appreciation for creating those multiple streams and then ensuring that if one of them dries up, then they've still got the other ones to fall back on. So that's quite cool.
Exactly. And that's especially true for real estate, which here, in the States took such a big hit, and really around the world in the last few years. It was so overinflated and prices were so inflated that, people that did have all their eggs in one basket, and that were stretched very thin, obviously, that wasn't good because when one person defaults on a mortgage and a bank forecloses on one house, obviously it affects the property values all around it. So it's like trying to catch a falling knife, and everyone in the neighborhood's affected. And, when here in the States, that's a lot of times people's biggest savings account is whatever their equity is in their home. And when that home price or value goes down, that has a huge impact on an economy.
One of the things I remember you mentioning in an interview was the importance of, as an entrepreneur, when you're setting up businesses and looking to get partners and draw customers, is just to be very willing and very passionate about selling. Do you believe it's something that you need to have within yourself if you're going to be an entrepreneur? Can someone be an entrepreneur and not be a seller as well, not like getting in front of people, not like being able to make a connection with others and make a sale?
Yeah. I mean, because now with the computer and the internet, I mean, for me growing up, I conducted all of my business over email. And even when someone wanted to schedule a phone call or something else, I knew that by getting on the phone, that would give away my age. So I always operated through email. And so if you don't necessarily want to sell face-to-face, I mean, you can sell in the same way through email. And, the most important thing when you're selling is, one, removing the objections or the obstacle that the customer has. But at the same time, the other most important thing is follow-up. And quite frankly, those two skills are important in everything in life. So if you're going in and you're interviewing for a job, the most important thing is to remove the obstacles on why they don't want to hire you and to also follow up and thank them for the interview. I mean, those two traits translate to every single thing. So, I mean, if you suck at follow-up, and you can't, follow up and thank someone for an interview, or you can't follow up and say, hey, how'd you like it, or anything like that, well, then you may be doomed. But that doesn't necessarily mean you have to know how to sell face-to-face.
Right. I see as well that you've touched on so many things, from getting into stock trading as well as setting up websites and also getting into real estate. And for a lot of people, it might be, geez, how is this 26-year-old able to do that? But are there any ways that a person can better educate themselves on a daily basis? So use their time more effectively?
Yeah, exactly. And well, I'm glad you brought this up, because one thing that I always talk about is what the internet has enabled us to do, and that is, whether we do it from our cell phones or whether we access it from, obviously, a computer, you can find the answers to just about any question that you have. So, saying I don't know isn't really a response that should be acceptable to anything, because, if you want to learn more about something, you can go on the internet, you can find out the answer. If you want to learn more about internet marketing, there's so much free material out there. Really, the answer to just about any question that you can imagine is out there. Now, you might find multiple answers to a question, and it might be up to you to decide what's correct and what's not, because obviously everything on the internet is not true. But with that being said, there's so much information out there and at our fingertips, and the best of all is that it's all free. So I think that there's really no excuse for anyone to not continually educate themselves. I mean, the people around you are doing that. So if you want to set yourself apart, or if you want to be better than them, or if you want to make more money than them, or if you want to have more freedom than them, whatever's important to you, you have to continually educate yourself, because if not, you're falling behind, because the world is changing pretty fast. So the only way to keep up with that is to teach yourself everything you can. And, 20 years ago, the only way we'd be able to do that would be to go and get a library card and hang out at the library. And if, the one book with your answer was checked out, you'd have to come back on Wednesday when it's going to be returned. And that doesn't exist anymore on the internet. You can find whatever it is you want to know. And quite frankly, you can teach yourself. I don't suggest this, but I mean, all the information you're going to learn getting a 4-year college degree, you can really do that on the internet and find all that same information at a much lower cost. Obviously, you're not going to have the diploma to show for it, or the relationships or anything else, but the education can be taught anywhere.
So over the last 16-odd years that you've been in business and creating businesses for yourself, you would have met hundreds, possibly thousands of young budding entrepreneurs who are trying to do stuff, and you probably would have seen the common failings or things that these people tend to be doing wrong. Now, I know you've written this book for the express purpose of addressing some of the pitfalls that entrepreneurs come across, but if there were any additional kind of tips that you could point out to our listeners that would help them and better getting control of themselves as well as their businesses when they go forward to building them, what would those be based on your experience of meeting these people?
Well, I think there's really a lot of answers to that question. The most common is people that think they are always waiting for the right time to start a business. So, Cameron, I have this idea for a business. I'm not ready to start it yet. Well, why aren't you ready? Well, I don't have enough money. I don't have enough education. I don't have enough connections. I don't have enough time. It's a lot easier to come up with excuses for not starting a business than it is for, just going out there, putting yourself out there and starting small. I mean, a lot of people think that they need a business loan or they need to borrow a lot of money from family or, max out their credit cards or do all those things. And in my book, which tells my story, I mean, I never borrowed any money. I never did any of those things. I never borrowed money from my parents. I never took outside investors. I just started small, and it took me, I'm 26 now, so I started when I was 9, so that's 17 years. If obviously I knew everything then that I know now, I could do it in a much shorter time period. But with all that being said, I think, the easiest thing to do is to just get started, and there's no direct path. So you might come up with a new product or service and that you think it's going to, most of your customers are going to want it for this reason. You might find out that, hey, all your customers are buying it for a totally different reason, and you might end up changing the whole business model because of that. But that being said, you would have never learned that if you hadn't gotten started. So that's the biggest thing that I see with entrepreneurs is that they're just afraid to take the plunge sometimes.
Right. And if some of our viewers want to find out more about yourself, see where you're going to be speaking next, where would they be able to find that kind of stuff?
Yeah, well, that's great. Well, I give a number of talks around the world, really, and a lot of times they aren't public events. They're at a private conference or a school or a college, university, that sort of thing, or at a company. But my website is the best way to keep in touch with me and to follow me, and that's at CameronJohnson.com. So just CameronJohnson.com. And thanks so much for your time today, Josh. This was fun.
No, I appreciate that. Thanks again, Cameron. And once again, it's CameronJohnson.com if you want to find out more information about him, guys. Now, he's written his latest book out, as you call the shots, and I definitely recommend everyone go and get that. I'm going to be perusing through that time and time again, as well as listening to the audiobook that I picked up just yesterday. And also, Cool. He has a Twitter account, and although he sometimes posts relevant articles that might be of interest, so check out that at twitter.com/Cameron Johnson. And